Awesome. Welcome, Allie.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. So for the viewers and listeners at home, we have Allie joining us today. And Allie, I'm just going to let you kind of open up and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Allie. I'm 33 from London, Ontario. Born and raised Londoner. I've boomeranged a couple times, gone to explore other places, and always keep coming back. So it's a lot of fun. I'm a mother to a 2-year-old who's very busy.
Yes. Super cute.
Thank
Super
you.
cute.
Yeah.
Allie has a 2-year-old son named David.
Yeah.
And you have my puppy right now, so we can be doing this podcast. So
Exactly.
Got a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old, and
Yeah. Well, David's loved having Coco in the house. We had a dog, Walter, that passed away just after David's first birthday. So it's been really nice hearing the little scamper of puppy feet in the house again. And David's loving to help feed Coco and give her pets.
oh,
So
that's
it's
cute. I
fun.
can't wait. I can't wait to see them together a little bit more. But okay, let's just kick this off. First question: what does authenticity mean to you?
I think it just means being yourself in a comfortable way, right? And I think a lot of times for like women especially, but people wear different hats. Like you're a different person who you are with your family than perhaps how you show up at work or how you show up if you volunteer, etc. So I think authenticity is really being able to feel that regardless of what facet of your life you're in, you're being true to yourself.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So, Allie, you used to be a nurse.
Correct.
And tell me a little bit about that. Like, what kind of nursing did you do, and why are you not practicing anymore?
Yeah, so I started my career with the NRT, which is essentially a float pool. So we went to every floor of the hospital based on staffing needs, wherever they were needed most. So the thought was, I'll do this and I'll figure out kind of my niche or where I want to work. And I never really felt it. Like I never really found an area that spoke to me. I spent some time working in forensics, specifically in sexual assault and domestic violence treatment program out of St. Joe's. And that was a lot of like, I don't want to say fun, obviously, because of the type of work, but it was a really great collaborative work environment. And that really got me interested in kind of leadership. But I just found in general, all of my nursing colleagues were so burnt out, were so miserable. I thought at the time that I was so burnt out and so miserable. I was like, I need to pivot. I need to do something completely different with my life. So I went back to school. So yeah, it was one of those kind of moments where I wrote my GMAT kind of on a whim. I got an okay enough score, not great, but okay enough to get in to a couple schools and figure out my options. So I decided to go to University of Windsor and did my MBA. But yeah, literally the day I found out I got into my MBA, I resigned from the job I was in, rented out my house, and then my aunt runs a bed and breakfast in Florence, Italy. So I decided to have my little kind of, Tuscan moment and worked as a housekeeper at her B&B for a couple months just to reset before starting school. And so yeah, I started school fresh and loved it. And that's where I met my husband. So I always joke he's the best ROI I got out of that program for sure.
That's amazing. So, in terms of being away from nursing now, do you miss it or?
Yes and no. The fun thing about my job now is I do change management consulting. So I often work in healthcare organizations. So it's not fun, but sometimes seeing it's like, oh, thank goodness I left. I did go back to the bedside for a bit during COVID because I was working as a consultant full time and I couldn't travel at the beginning, and being still licensed and obviously with the demand on our system was happy to kind of help in that way. So I worked full time for 9 months until the consulting picked back up again and then went back to that. So yeah, I don't miss it though.
You don't miss it?
No.
So let's talk a little bit about your pregnancy and sort of the journey to becoming a mom, because I know little bits and pieces, but for the people at home that don't know who you are or your journey, I'd love to touch on that a little bit if you're okay with that.
Yeah, for sure. Like anything, like do you want me just to like
Yeah,
run through it? So we knew we wanted a family, and it was important to us. I have endometriosis, so I had been kind of given the heads up that conceiving might be a bit of a journey for us. So we decided to just kind of start pretty much right before our wedding, and we were fortunate to get pregnant 6 weeks after our wedding. And it was COVID again, so it was one of those weird things where I was going to all the appointments by myself. You couldn't FaceTime, you couldn't do anything, so it's kind of a very isolating time to be pregnant. So at my first ultrasound, They told me that there were 2 sacs, but they couldn't visualize them well. Are we allowed to swear on this? Or I have to
Yeah,
ask that?
that's wrong.
Okay, just wanted to double check. So, because I'm larger, I am plus size. Normally, they would have at that ultrasound done an internal, but they were only able to do external. And they said that because I was like obese, they were unable to visualize my whole uterus, which, by the way, I know is like not a real thing. So they told me there were 2 sacs, and then at my 13-week ultrasound, they said that there was just one baby and that I must have been misunderstood, that there was probably only one. So I like didn't even think anything of it. I was just like, okay, like we're just having, one baby. And then, like you feel like you're being gaslit. Cause I'm like, I'm pretty sure you said 2 sacs. Like I remember hearing only one heartbeat. Like when she said there was only one heartbeat, because you obviously can't hear it anything at like
Right.
6 weeks or whatever the first ultrasound was. So I kind of didn't really think anything of it, went through the rest of my pregnancy. Starting around 32 weeks, I went into prodromal labor, which is like a special type of hell, where basically you go into labor every day. So you have contractions that progress like you're in real labor. So going from like 20 minutes to 10 to 7 to 5, going all the way up to 2 to 3 minutes apart for hours. Like sometimes it would be like 20 hours of that. And then it just stops. But the important thing about prodromal labor is your cervix isn't changing. So even though I was having contractions, we went to the hospital multiple times being like, this is it, it's really happening. And they're like, nope, still just prodromal labor, like you're still 0 centimeters.
Goodness.
So from 32 weeks to 40 weeks, I basically was in labor like every day, wasn't sleeping, was so anxious, just felt horrible, obviously. So my midwives were incredible, absolutely fabulous, and they induced me at 39 weeks, and then my induction was a process. So I got induced on the Sunday with a Foley catheter, for those of you who are familiar with that, where they put a balloon in your cervix. And then my water broke Tuesday morning, but it was a slow leak. So they allowed me to labor at home because, again, COVID, I really wanted to be at home for as much as possible so I could move around and do all the things. And then the midwife came and checked on me later that evening and said, everything's fine, but once your water's been broken for about 24 hours, we want you in the hospital because we want to be giving you antibiotics, etc. So at that point, I'd already been up for a couple days. I was so tired. So it's like, let's just go to the hospital, start the Pitocin, let's just get this thing out of, I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl at the time. So it's like, let's just get this show on the road. So it was formally induced with Pitocin Tuesday afternoon, late evening. And then my son was born Thursday morning.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was an awesome delivery experience. The midwives were incredible. My husband actually got to catch our son. So
Really?
once his head was out, my husband got to catch him, which was awesome because again, he wasn't able to come to any of our appointments.
Wow.
So it was
chills everywhere.
yeah, but it was just it was hard, right? Because it's such a special experience. And when you look at shows or things, there's always both parents are there watching the ultrasound, so all the information I was giving him was third hand. So it was really nice for him to have that moment. That's part of the reason we didn't find out the sex of the baby beforehand, because then he got to be the first one to see. And then say it's a boy.
Did Amir fall? Was he an emotional mess or?
Yeah. And I mean, my mom was there too, thankfully. The week before I was induced, they changed the hospital policy to allow 2 people. So that was amazing. It was really important for us. And again, it was such a long labor. It was I think helpful that they were able to kind of give each other little breaks and sleeping because yeah, so it was long, over 40 hours of active labor, but yeah, and then everything was great. David was perfect. 7'6", awesome kid.
He is perfect. He is so beautiful. So beautiful. So last day.
And then the magic happened after. So luckily, our city has this policy where if you have an uncomplicated birth, which ours was, and everything's going well, you can choose to go home 4 hours postpartum. And just have your follow-up care from home, which is what we wanted. So that way we could, again, have more family around us, etc. And then, again, everything was fine. So I, signed out, went home, was super excited, and then literally introduced him to my dad, David, who he's named after. So they got to have that moment. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go shower because I just really wanted to shower. And as I was walking down the stairs to go into the shower, I started hemorrhaging significantly. So we called the midwife as we kind of packed me back up into the car. And within about 20 minutes, I was taken into surgery where they removed a second placenta. So I would have had another baby at some point early on. Obviously, it's called a vanishing twin, so that would have happened before the 13-week ultrasound. So that was just kind of a weird thing, kind of processing, because it's like, okay, I didn't make that up. Like that, like legitimately happened.
So how have you talked to anyone about that? Like, how have you dealt with that? Because I don't care what anyone says. I've lost a baby, and it is probably one of the hardest things to do, whether you're 2 weeks pregnant or you lose a 6-month-old baby girl, right? Like
Yeah.
it for women, I find the minute we find out we're pregnant, it is so real. So how have you dealt with it, and what advice would you give anyone?
Yeah, and I think it's exactly that. And like, I've even had like a bunch of very like dismissive doctors in the past saying, "Oh, well, at least you got one healthy one out of the pregnancy," and like saying things like that. And it's like, and they're like, "Oh, or at least you didn't know for sure until you delivered." Um, but yeah. So for me, it was like the weirdest thing was I was having like Amir. So I work for a U.S. company, so I had my 6-week vacation, aka mat leave. Um, but Amir was on parental leave, so like he would be out for a walk with David, and I would just like hear a baby crying if I was like resting, or so it was really messing with my head. So I spoke to a woman who's a medium, which like is normally not something I would say that I'm super open to.
Right.
But I spoke to this woman who's a medium, and she, communicated with the baby and like talked to him and gave us, I think some peace in
So was
terms of
another
that.
little boy?
So yeah, so she said it was another little boy, and the funny thing is because we again didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, but all along we had 2 boy names picked and 1 girl name picked. So we did decide to name him that, and like to give him the other name, the second name, and then now what we do is we've done like for David's 2 birthdays is the night before we do like a little cake, and just Amir and I have a private moment and just kind of.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And so, but it was really kind of comforting when we saw the media, or I saw the medium, because she said, his purpose is to kind of keep an eye on David, because David's going to be really mischievous and he's going to need that guardian angel. And I can tell you that's definitely been true so far. But then the other thing she said was like, oh, like he's been trying to reach you. He's been coming to you as a cardinal. And I was like, okay, like, again, I don't, if you're not a super strong believer in kind of that realm, I was very skeptical, and Amir was skeptical of it too, but supportive of me going. So when I got home from the appointment, we were outside just talking, and I was telling him about it, and it was, late fall. And as we were talking, literally a cardinal came and like sat next to
right
us, like very close. So yeah, so it's been like crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your marriage, if you're open to that.
Yeah.
So you are married to a Muslim man,
Mm-hmm.
and how has that been? Like, have you converted over? Like, are you practicing, or are you sticking with your own beliefs and faith? And
Yeah, so we very much like honor each other's faith and spirituality. And I think like the awesome thing is we probably talk more about religion and scripture than most people I know who are in same faith couples,
Right.
because there's so many similarities and so many differences. And also looking at kind of cultural applications of that. So my husband's family's from Lebanon. He was born and raised in Canada. So looking at kind of that Lebanese culture in terms of like that approach, he's Sunni. So looking at like, what does that mean? Where are things kind of cultural versus like religious? Because I think that was one of my ignorances, just like full disclosure, being a white chick from London, Ontario, like I didn't know a lot. Like I didn't realize how many, and this is a very ignorant statement, but I didn't realize how many different sects there are, how many different,
born and raised Muslim, I didn't even know. Still don't know. Like, honestly, so
Yeah.
don't know.
but it's like and then when I think about like Christianity, and there's so many different sects of Christianity, so many different applications, like even if you look at like a Roman Catholic person in Toronto, how they practice versus a Roman Catholic person in Rome versus the Philippines, they're all have like different cultural practices that really influence how they celebrate their faith. So yeah, I think it drives a lot of really fun, interesting conversations. So I have not converted. I was born and raised Catholic, but I didn't have my confirmation.
Right.
So I'm still a very like spiritual person. I still, really enjoy having, faith-based conversations.
Right.
But yeah.
So how are you raising David then? Like, is that like I find sometimes when you have 2 different cultures coming together, when you have children, that can become a bit of a sticking point. Like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we're raising David Muslim, and then, but it's really important that he understands his Catholic heritage as well. So, primarily Muslim. So Amir reads Quran to him every night. I read like the Lord's Prayer to him every night. And then, the nice thing about both being Abrahamic religions is a lot of the stories are in both, right? So it's really nice to kind of, we have that similarity. And again, he's only 2 at this point, so he's not asking the tough questions that I know are going to be coming at some point. But
I will.
oh yeah. But we just continue to like, encourage like conversation and stuff. And I think being raised with faith and tradition is the most important thing. And so for me, I wasn't as tied to my Catholic faith as Amir is to his Muslim faith.
Right.
So it's much more important for him that David be Muslim than for me that David be Catholic. So it just made
worked
sense
out well.
to do that. Yeah, again, with kind of, we have very aligned values in terms of like family and stuff like that. So it was pretty easy to, I don't want to say easy, but it was the right choice for our family to do that.
And you come from a big family, right? A great, supportive, beautiful family, which I know some of your family. And then does Amir have a big family?
Yeah, so his family, his parents are the only ones in Canada of their siblings, and then he has 4 siblings who all live in Windsor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
And you guys are all close, and they probably all just love David to bits.
Yeah, David's like lucky. He's the first grandchild both sides, so he's
Oh,
getting like so spoiled.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, let's get into a little bit deeper stuff. If you, and I know when I ask this question, it's not always just one raw moment in someone's life that defines them, because I think sometimes there's a lot of different moments. But if you had to pick something in your life this far that really has shaped you, or I don't know if I'm asking this right, but has really changed you as a person?
That's a good question. I think like that transition to motherhood. I'm the type of person, like I worked as a nanny through nursing school. I thought it was going to be so easy. Like I thought I had it figured out. Like I was a live-in nanny for over a year. I thought like my mom worked and raised us while we were growing up. So I saw that. And so I was like, I
got this.
I've got this. And like, even like my mom, she went back to school when she was in her 40s. So she became a lawyer in her 40s. So she was like, set a really good roadmap in terms of you can always change if like you're not happy with what you're doing or if you want to do something different. And so I was like, oh, this motherhood thing is going to be so easy. It's going to be like, check. And then but it was like, it was a lot.
Surprise.
Yeah. And I think also I have ADHD, and where I work really well with my ADHD is like being able to do things all over the place, if that makes sense. And I time block based on like where my concentration is going to be at. And so I had all these like systems in place, and then you throw a baby in the mix and the baby's kind of like, well, fuck your systems. Like I'm here.
Right.
And I was not prepared for that. So it was like, those super humbling moments of like parenthood, like in the trenches. And then just trying to connect with people. And again, like it was tough because of COVID, like restrictions, like we still, like there weren't like mom and baby classes, they were all virtual. And I was, again, back at work part-time. So I was working virtually every day because my office was in Seattle at the time. And so I was on Zoom all day. So the last thing I wanted to do was join another frickin' Zoom call to like meet people who were like, not to minimize mat leave. It's very stressful. It's got its own thing, but to like be like, hey, this is my 1 hour lunch break, and I want to like talk and connect with you guys. Like where I just felt like I didn't really, if it was face to face, I feel like it might have been easier.
It's art. I think motherhood sometimes on its own, like without COVID, can be very isolating. So then you add that to the mix, and it's just like, and then you've got your own stuff going on. I think it just is like quadruple whammy, right? But you made it through so far, right? He's only 2, so you haven't screwed up too much yet.
Yeah, hope not. No. So, but it was wild. Like, I don't know, like that. Humbling is the only way I can describe that transition, because like
So what is, if you had to pick one kind of motherhood moment that you felt like you were a failure, what would you If there is like a
Oh,
month, yeah, there's probably a
Pick one. Like this week it was like cutting a sandwich the wrong way. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I think it was like, going through like I had pretty bad postpartum depression and going through periods where it's like I couldn't even shower. Like it was just like so exhausting. It took like all of my brain and willpower, um, to just like basically like keep him alive. And I felt like I had nothing in my tank for me, right? So, we're so lucky to have such an amazing support network in terms of like family and friends who are just incredible. And like they all stepped up and were awesome. And like I can't speak highly enough about his daycare. Like they were fabulous. And like, yeah.
Do you find it hard asking for help? Like, did you struggle to ask your friends for help, or did they just know?
I do find it hard asking for help, but especially when I'm in one of those places where it's like, I don't actually know what would be helpful right now. Right? Like, I remember at one point, I was struggling and I reached out to a friend and I was like, hey, I'm struggling. I really need help with all these things. And she's like, okay, well, this week's not good, next week's not good, but the following week, like, could I drop off dinner on Monday? And I just got so annoyed and I was like, you know what, don't worry about it. And then afterwards, I'm like, you know what, fuck it. Let's just say yes. And then at least, 2 weeks from now, like, that's going to be a
That's
help, one thing off my plate.
right.
So I think also for me is I'm the type of person who will try to do everything and then I hit the breaking point. So I've been getting a lot better at trying to like recognize where like fail points are going to be coming down the road and trying to put extra supports in place like ahead of time. So like Amir's an accountant, he works primarily in audit and tax. So we joke that like March and April is my tax widowship because he like works insane hours. So it's like, well, what that looks like is making sure that, I have play groups organized twice a week so that David's kind of being fulfilled, or we have, babysitters, or we arrange to have like family watch him more during
So
that
you can
time,
stay.
recognizing that I'm going to kind of take over some of the domestic labor that normally falls on Amir's plate.
Right. So I know you and I have personally talked about this, but I want to ask you a little bit about your struggle with mental illness and sort of what happened and what that looks like, and just your journey with Ozempic as well. So I'm going to give you the floor to,
God. Okay.
yeah.
Well, so after having David, all my hormones were like all over the place. And so I have this amazing family doctor who ran a bunch of hormone blood work. And he's like, I think you might actually have undiagnosed PCOS, which is like polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I'm like, nah, okay, maybe. So I was being worked up for that and I was seeing an endocrinologist. And one of the markers for PCOS is hyperinsulinemia. So your body doesn't process insulin properly. So fortunately, I'm not pre-diabetic or diabetic, but my insulin isn't working as well as it should be. So they had put me on metformin, and randomly I just started losing like a ton of weight. Like I lost like 20 pounds in 6 months. And they're like, wow, people normally don't lose weight on metformin. And then they're like, you're getting close to the point where, or sorry, while that was happening, my blood work started to stabilize. So they were like, we still don't really know kind of what you need to be taking, but at least your blood work's getting better. They're like, would you be open to going on Ozempic? Because we think if we get your weight to a certain threshold, that this might actually alleviate some of your other hormones that are out of balance. This is under the care of an endocrinologist. So I was open to that, did a bit of research on Ozempic and was like, yep, totally fine. Happy to take it. Took it, felt like crap, like felt like absolute shit. It was like morning sickness and a hangover rolled up into one fun little package for like, it was awful. And then about 4 weeks into it, I had like a lot of like life stress too in terms of work and stuff like that. But I just started feeling like I wasn't coping as much as I had been. So I did all the things you're supposed to do. I'm fortunate to be able to kind of choose how much I work. So I scaled back on how much I was working. I, put some extra supports in place in terms of like a routine sitter for our son one afternoon a week. Like I just did all the things you're supposed to do, started increasing how often I was going to therapy, and I just started feeling worse. And then I started having these really intrusive thoughts about hurting myself. And I was like, this is kind of messed up and this isn't normal. And this isn't like, even when I've been depressed in the past, I've not been suicidal. So I'm like, this doesn't really feel right. And then even like Amir was commenting like my personality, like I wasn't seeming like myself. And, and I, again, didn't really think anything of it. I just thought it was like the stress from work. I had a really challenging client case during that time period, and some tough work going on there. So I was like, you know what, maybe it's just like everything else that's happening. So I'm going to take like some time off work. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. And then it got to the point where like I couldn't drive my car without wanting to like get into an accident. If I saw like a knife in the kitchen, I just wanted to stab myself. I'm like, okay, this is becoming like very problematic. So my therapist recommended this clinic for this. It's a family doctor, but she has extra training in maternal mental health. I think you're speaking to her. She reached out to her, and I was able to get a referral through my doctor to see her, and she did a whole med review. And basically at that point, like I was not working, couldn't drive, wasn't cooking because that was like very like triggering, but these thoughts were so intrusive. And yeah, it turns out that like Ozempic can cause suicidality in some people, but it's not listed as a side effect. But the same exact drug that's under a different manufacturer called Wegovy does have it listed as a side effect.
My goodness.
So, because it's an injection you take once a week, it took about 4 weeks for it to be fully out of my system. So it was like Amir actually is the one who found that like online. He was like, in the depths of Reddit was like, I think it might be the Ozempic. And then that doctor kind of verified it. And then the pharmacist is like, yeah, I've had a couple people saying that it's been impacting their mood. So yeah, and I think, at that point, like our system, I think everyone can agree, is in a mental health crisis. So I went to my family doctor. He called Emerge, and it was going to be something insane, like a 5-day wait to get a bed at Vic for mental health. So he said, you can go, but the odds are you're going to be stuck in Emerge for a long time. And he said, I don't know if that's going to make you worse and be more stressful for you, like being out of kind of routine. So I'm really lucky to have an amazing support network. So I reached out to them, kind of set up a schedule of people to help with David or to kind of, hang out with me.
So I'm just going to stop you there for a sec. Like, this is your personality coming out. Like, even though you're having these suicidal thoughts, you still have the brain power to go, I fucking need to like line all this shit up. Like, like, how does one do that? Like, I don't, like,
I think it's honestly like having worked in the system and having been a nurse on the other side, or having unfortunately seen family members go through crisis, is these things don't happen overnight. And I know that they don't happen overnight. And like, it's not like you just wake up one day and you're going to feel better. It's going to be a massive journey to get you there. So it's like, and I could feel, I'm like, I'm on the decline. So I'm like, it's only going to get worse. So I'm fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you want to look at it. I have a number of women in my peer group who've also experienced postpartum depression. So I was able to just like message 2 of them, and like between them and Amir, they were able to coordinate everything. So it wasn't that I was actually like orchestrating like so-and-so's bringing dinner on this day or so-and-so's bringing that. Someone else did that. But I was able to reach out and get that back. And honestly, it was like beyond humbling. Like my one girlfriend, she came over the one morning and just watched David for the whole day. So Amir like took me out of the house, and like I felt like a zombie, like hadn't showered in God knows how long. But like, he drove me around, took me to Home Sense, took me for sushi, and just like things I needed to feel human again.
what would you say to someone, and I'm getting emotional, if you didn't have that support system?
Honestly, yeah. One thing I think a lot of people don't realize that they have that support system. And I think asking for help is the hardest thing.
As women, it is.
Oh, 100%. But like, it was so humbling how many people even like, there was like a friend of a friend who I hadn't really spoken to in a long time who said, hey, sorry if this is intrusive. So-and-so mentioned you're going through a hard time. Is there a night next week I can drop off dinner? And like, I wasn't even home. She left it on the porch. But it was just like, I think, in times of old, people had churches or mosques or synagogues where if someone was going through something, you'd hear about it through that. And then that group of people would kind of rally and organize what needs to happen. And I think we've lost that. But I also think that you have more support in your community than you realize if you are willing to ask.
So you being on the going through that. So I had told you when I saw you come to the business groups, I could tell something was off. You weren't yourself. But I felt like it wasn't, it's almost this struggle. Do you say something and be wrong, or do you say something and you could save a life?
Yeah.
Like, so again, if you were to give advice to someone, like, how would you have taken that if someone walked up and said, Allie, I noticed you're not really yourself? Like, would you be offended by that, or?
Well, no, because people did, and at first, like, it's hard. Like, I'm the CEO of a multinational company. I've got an amazing group of people, but I was still going to these business meetings because I was recently, appointed president or whatever. So I felt kind of like I had to go. But like I wasn't even working. Like I had taken time off of work, and so I felt like all of my energy for the week kind of poured into like going to those meetings. And being as present as I was able to be. And honestly, like the biggest lesson for me is being able to be vulnerable. And the number of people who I shared that with, of all ages, all genders, like all whatever demographics, who then shared, their own stories, their own experiences, or, that of a family member, or, just appreciation. Because I think, like I was very open with my staff. I said, my mental health is struggling and I'm going to be taking some time off. These are the things I have bandwidth to support with. These are the things I don't. And then again, like an amazing team of people who are there. But I think, yeah, it shouldn't always be on the person to ask for help. But I think we need to create systems where we are asking for help and offering for help. So like, like to your point, like you noticed something was off and you brought it up to me and I was able to say, yeah, actually, well, this is what's been going on. And since doing that, the number of people who I've talked about who've had similar experiences, whether on an Ozempic or, just other medications, where like they didn't realize that there were mental health side effects. So,
Right.
yeah.
And how are you doing now?
I'm doing so much better. Yeah.
Now?
Yeah. Honestly,
The sparkles back in your eyes?
sparkles back. But I think the important thing is like for me is like I can't use my like ADHD hacks that I used to use with a child. So that meant that I had to go back on medication for my ADHD.
Right.
And for me, for a while that felt like a failure because I hadn't been on it since I was in school. But it's been totally transformational, even just in my emotional regulation, my sleep. Like I'm not waking up at 2 a.m. with like racing thoughts, can't get back to bed, and then I end up just like starting work at 3 a.m. because like what else am I gonna do?
Right.
So I think it's been really kind of transformational. So I think, ain't no shame in the pharmacy game if that's what you need to do. And
There ain't no shame, girly. There isn't. And thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that, because I know sometimes being vulnerable can be tough, and especially in the position that you're in and sort of your status and the family name and all that. I think it's really going to hit a lot of people at home that are going to be listening and watching to this. So thank you. And it just makes us all better and realize again, and I've said this a couple of times on the podcast, if we can actually realize that we are all so much more alike than we are different, we wouldn't have half the problems that we have in this world, right? Like it's just the vulnerability is where I think it's at. I think that's the new, I don't know, I think it should be what everyone's doing, right? So I'm going to lighten things up a little bit by asking you a more fun question. If you were to be arrested and no explanation, nobody knows why, what do you think your friends and family would think why you were arrested?
ooh. Honestly, I don't even know. Like, yeah. Like probably just something stupid, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like I'm a pretty boring person.
Are you though, Allie?
Yeah, like I don't really drink. Like I'm, so yeah, I can't really think of anything. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not like a fighter.
No, you're not a fighter. Okay, next question. Friends? Did you watch Friends?
Yes.
Okay, if you could be any character, who and why?
For fun, I would love to be Phoebe, just to know what's going on inside that girl's head. Like it just would be wild. I think she's so different than who I am as a person, that it would just be a lot of fun to kind of
Feel that all out.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And then this one's a little bit more heavier, but if you could bring everybody into a room that you've ever met in your whole life, dead or alive, who would it be?
Ooh. Like every single person, or
Anyone that you've met on your journey thus far? Dead or alive, famous, not famous?
Honestly, I think I would just like love to have like unstructured time with my parents. Because yeah, like I think in this season of life, like they both work, and they help us a lot with our son, but we don't get time just to like hang out anymore. My dad and I have recently started doing pedicures together every month, which is like super fun, but it's hard for us to like find time like in each other's busy schedules to like get together and yeah.
Is it, see, sometimes when we say we're busy, like, don't you find, so I'm having it tattooed on me, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
So how important is this? And if it is that important, then why can you both not carve out, not just you,
Yeah.
just people in general, why can you not carve out the time to do the things that you want to do?
Yeah, and I think like the hardest thing, you know, one of the hardest lessons for me in motherhood is like I used to be involved in many boards and stuff like that, and I've taken a step back right now from basically all but one. Is when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And I do work, and so our son is in daycare full time. So a lot of times when people are available is the only time I have with my son. So it's not that I'm not willing to carve out the time. It's like most of my friends now, when we connect, it's during the day. I can be a lot more flexible during the day, or it's like later in the evening, but like I go to bed at 8:30. So like we've got like a really tight window here of like where, and I know that that will change and evolve as he gets older, but I don't want to miss, you know, that kind of prime time when people are like, oh, let's go for like an after work catch up, or let's go for dinner. Like that for me, my goal is to be as focused on him as possible and just really enjoying our time as a family.
And that's totally fair.
Yeah.
That's totally fair. The last question, and then I'm gonna let you be on your way, but I need you to close your eyes for this one. Don't open until I tell you.
Okay.
Okay, so when you open them, I gotta make sure it's the right side. The first word that comes to your mind. Okay, you can go ahead and open.
Happy. Despite the tears.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you very much, Allie.
Thanks for
That was
having me.
great.
That was fun.
Let's get real.